The stars had always seemed peaceful to Danny Harper. He was 12 years old and loved watching the night sky from his backyard in Montana. His little sister Lucy was 9, and she always wanted to join him whenever he set up the old camping tent their father had given them. On this warm summer night, the two children lay on their backs on a blanket, pointing at constellations and making up stories about alien worlds. Their parents and were inside the farmhouse, enjoying a quiet evening after a long day of work. The Harper family had lived on this land for 3 generations. It was a simple life, but a good one. The nearest neighbors were 5 miles away, and the silence of the countryside was something they treasured. Danny was telling Lucy about a science fiction book he had been reading when the sky changed. A section of stars seemed to shimmer and bend like heat rising from summer pavement. Lucy grabbed her brother's arm and pointed upward. Neither of them could speak as a massive shape blocked out the stars above them. The craft was unlike anything they had ever seen. It made no sound at all. Its surface was smooth and dark purple, almost invisible against the night sky except for the faint glow of lights running along its edges. Danny's first instinct was to run, but his legs would not move. Lucy was frozen beside him, her small hand gripping his shirt. A beam of violet light shot down from the ship and surrounded them both. Danny felt his body lift off the ground. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing he saw before the light consumed everything was his mother running out of the house, her face twisted in horror as she screamed their names. Harper watched her children disappear into the sky, was right behind her, and together they stood in the empty backyard, staring at the place where their children had been seconds ago. The alien craft made no sound as it rose higher and higher until it was just another point of light among the stars. Then it vanished completely. The Harper family was not alone in their tragedy that night. Across the world, in 7 different countries, similar scenes played out. 23 children between the ages of 6 and 14 were taken from their homes, their backyards, their school playgrounds. The attacks were coordinated and precise. No adults were harmed. No evidence was left behind except for the faint traces of radiation that human scientists would later identify as signatures of faster-than-light travel. Within hours, the news spread across every network on Earth. Governments that had long kept the existence of alien life secret were forced to reveal the truth. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and something out there had just taken their children. The United Earth Defense Coalition held an emergency meeting in Geneva. Military leaders from every major nation sat around a massive table, their faces grim. Admiral Frank stood at the head of the room, a holographic display showing the locations of each kidnapping behind him. 23 children, he said, his voice low and steady. Taken in a coordinated strike that lasted less than 10 minutes. Our planetary defense systems detected nothing until it was too late. We have confirmed that the radiation signatures match those of vessels belonging to a species called the... The room was silent. Most of the people present had only learned about alien civilizations a few years ago when humanity made first contact with a peaceful trading species called the... Since then, they had learned that the galaxy was full of intelligent life, and that Earth was classified as something called a... were planets with extreme conditions, high gravity, toxic atmospheres, deadly wildlife, harsh climates. Most intelligent species evolved on gentle worlds with stable environments. Humans were different. They had clawed their way to dominance on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. This made them stronger, faster, and more resilient than almost any other known species. It also made them terrifying to the rest of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth for a long time. They were a species of tall, thin beings with skin and large black eyes. They came from a world of eternal daylight and gentle weather. To them, humans were monsters from a nightmare world. But they were also fascinated by human potential. Their military scientists believed that human children, if captured and trained young enough, could become the ultimate soldiers. Commander of the research vessel Quiet Blade had led the kidnapping operation. He stood in the observation room of his ship, watching the human children through a transparent wall. They had been placed in a large holding cell with soft floors and dim lighting. Most alien children would be crying and screaming after such an experience. The human children were doing something unexpected. They were organizing. The oldest boy, the one they had taken from the Montana farmhouse, was moving among the younger children. He was speaking to them in soft tones, checking if anyone was hurt, asking their names. A teenage boy with dark hair was examining the walls of their cell, running his hands along the seams. A small girl with red hair was watching the guards through the transparent barrier, her eyes tracking their movements with unsettling focus. Felt a chill run through his thin body. He had studied human behavior extensively before planning this mission. He knew about their pack bonding instincts and their protective nature toward young members of their species, but seeing it in action was different from reading about it in reports. "They are not afraid," his assistant observed. "They should be afraid." "They are afraid," replied, "but they are not letting it control them. This is what makes them dangerous." Back on Earth, and Harper stood in a government facility, surrounded by other parents whose children had been taken. They were being briefed by military officials who promised that everything possible would be done to bring their children home. Listened to the words, but they felt hollow. Her bobbies were somewhere out there in the cold darkness of space, surrounded by creatures she could not imagine. Put his arm around his wife and looked at the military officers with eyes that held no tears, only a cold and burning anger. "You find them," he said. "You find our children and you bring them home, and when you do, you make those things pay for what they have done." Admiral met the father's gaze and nodded slowly. He had children of his own. He understood the fire that burned in Harper's heart. It was the same fire that burned in the hearts of parents across the entire planet. They had made a mistake that would echo through galactic history. They had studied human strength and human resilience. They had measured human aggression and human adaptability, but they had failed to understand the one thing that made humans truly dangerous. They had taken the children, and now every single human being on Earth had only one thought in their minds, one purpose, one mission. Get them back, no matter the cost. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the UEDC battlecruiser Relentless and stared at the stars through the main viewport. He was 42 years old with streaks in his dark hair and a face marked by years of military service. When Admiral had called him with the mission details, had not hesitated for even a second. He had a daughter back on Earth. She was safe, but 23 other children were not. The Relentless was one of humanity's warships. It was fast, heavily armed and crewed by some of the best soldiers and scientists Earth had to offer, had been given complete authority to select his team, and he had chosen carefully. Every person on this ship had volunteered knowing they might not come back. Commander Lisa Grant was his second in command. She was a tactical genius who had made her reputation during the border conflicts 3 years ago. Her mind worked like a computer, analyzing situations and finding solutions that others missed. She stood beside now, reviewing the mission data on her tablet. "The radiation trail is fatting," she said, "but Dr. Shaw thinks he can track it for another 72 hours before it dissipates completely." Dr. Shaw was the ship's chief science officer. He was a quiet man with thick glasses and a gentle voice that seemed out of place on a military vessel, but his knowledge of alien species and technology was unmatched. He had spent his entire career preparing for a moment like this, even though he had hoped it would never come. Down in the science lab was working with his team to analyze the energy signatures left behind by the vessel. The trail led toward the outer rim, a region of space that existed beyond the reach of galactic law. Pirates, smugglers, and worse made their homes out there. It was the perfect place to hide stolen cargo. Or stolen children. Called a meeting of his senior officers in the main briefing room. Around the table sat Lisa, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Martinez, and Marine Commander Jack Riley. They were all experienced professionals, but the weight of this mission showed on their faces. "We have one shot at this," said. "They have a head start and they know this region of space better than we do. If we lose the trail, those kids disappear forever. That is not going to happen." Jack Riley leaned forward. He was a big man with hands and a shaved head. His Marines were the best fighters in the fleet, trained for exactly this kind of rescue operation. "What do we know about defenses?" he asked. Pulled up a holographic display showing a research station. "They favor energy shields over armor. Their weapons are designed for precision rather than power. In a straight fight, human technology has the advantage, but they will not give us a straight fight if they can avoid it." Martinez spoke next. She was responsible for the health of everyone on board, and soon she would be responsible for the health of 23 traumatized children. "What condition will the kids be in when we find them?" she asked. Hesitated before answering. "They are scientists. They will want to study the children, not harm them, but their methods might not account for human psychological needs. Isolation, strange environments, unfamiliar food. The children will be scared and confused, but they should be physically unharmed." What did not say was that they might also be conducting tests. Nothing lethal, probably, but enough to understand how human bodies worked. The thought made everyone in the room sick with anger. Meanwhile, aboard the Quiet Blade, Danny Harper was doing exactly what had predicted. He was keeping the other children together and keeping them calm. There were 23 of them in total, ranging from 6-year-old twin girls from Japan to a 14-year-old boy from Brazil named Carlos Santos. They came from different countries and spoke different languages, but fear and hope needed no translation. Danny had become their unofficial leader simply because he refused to give up. His sister Lucy was proving to be incredibly useful. She was small enough to fit through the ventilation shafts that ran throughout the ship. They had not considered that a human child could squeeze through spaces designed for maintenance drones. Lucy had already mapped half the ship and memorized the patrol schedules of the guards. "There are 2 guards outside our cell at all times," she reported to Danny in a whisper. "They change every 4 hours. The one with the scar on his face is scared of us. I can tell by how he never looks directly at us." Danny nodded and stored this information away. He did not know when it would be useful, but knowledge was power. Their father had taught them that. Sam was 14 and had a gift for technology. Back home in Texas, he had been building computers since he was 8 years old. The systems were alien and strange, but the basic principles were the same. Over the course of 3 days, he had figured out how to access the ship's internal communication network using a panel in their cell that the guards had overlooked. "I can listen to their conversations," Sam told Danny. "I do not understand their language yet, but I am learning. Give me another few days." The children were adapting in ways that horrified their captors. Children would have been helpless in this situation. They would have cried and begged and waited for adults to save them. Human children did not work that way. Commander reviewed the observation footage with growing unease. The oldest boy had established a clear hierarchy among the captives. The younger children looked to him for guidance and protection. The teenagers were each contributing their unique skills to what looked disturbingly like an organized resistance. "They are planning something," his assistant said nervously. "Of course they are," replied. "They are planning is what they do." He had expected the human children to be strong and resilient. He had expected them to adapt quickly to new environments. What he had not expected was the cold intelligence in their eyes. These were not helpless young creatures. These were predators in training, and they were learning everything they could about their captors. Back on the Relentless, the crew was pushing the engines harder than regulations allowed. Every hour mattered. Every minute could be the difference between rescue and tragedy. Cole stood at his post for 18 hours straight, refusing to rest while those children were still out there. Lisa Grant finally convinced him to sleep for a few hours by pointing out that he would be useless in a fight if he collapsed from exhaustion. Agreed reluctantly and retreated to his quarters, where he stared at a photograph of his daughter for a long time before closing his eyes. In his dreams, he saw the faces of 23 children he had never met. They were counting on him. They were waiting for someone to come and save them. "We are coming," he whispered in his sleep. "Hold on, we are coming." Across the void of space, Danny Harper lay awake in the dim light of the holding cell. His sister was curled up beside him, finally asleep after another day of crawling through ventilation shafts. Around them, the other children slept fitfully, their dreams haunted by memories of home. Danny did not know if anyone was coming to save them. He did not know if Earth even knew where they were, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going to let anything happen to these kids. He would fight with his bare hands if he had to. He would die before he let the aliens hurt his sister or any of the others. He was 12 years old and he was terrified. But he was also human, and humans did not give up, ever. The Galactic Council Chamber was an enormous dome floating in orbit around a neutral world called Centrum. Representatives from over 200 spacefaring species gathered here to discuss matters of interstellar importance. Today, every seat was filled, and every eye was focused on the human ambassador standing at the central podium. Ambassador was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years in diplomatic service and had negotiated treaties with species that could crush a human with one limb. None of that experience had prepared her for this moment. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. 12 standard days ago, vessels belonging to the collective entered Earth space without authorization. They abducted 23 human children from their homes. These children range in age from 6 to 14 years old. They are innocent, they are defenseless, and they are ours. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The delegate, a tall figure named High Coordinator Al, rose to speak. The collective denies any official involvement in this incident. If rogue elements within our society have acted improperly, we will investigate and take appropriate action. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your denial is noted. It is also irrelevant. The United Earth Defense Coalition has already dispatched vessels to recover our children. We are not here to ask for permission or assistance. We are here to deliver a warning. The chamber went silent. Even species who had never encountered humans before could sense the danger in her words. The collective has 40 standard cycles to return our children unharmed. For every cycle beyond that deadline, we will destroy one colony world. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates shouted objections and demands. The representatives screamed about acts of war and violations of galactic law. Through it all, stood perfectly still at the podium, waiting for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You call us, you classify our planet as hostile to intelligent life. You are correct. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We survived. We thrived. We conquered, and now something has taken our young. She paused and looked directly at the delegate. Do you understand what you have awakened? Do you have any idea what it will do to protect its children? You are about to find out. The Council moved to sanction Earth for its threats. Proposals were made to isolate humanity from galactic trade. Economic penalties were discussed. Then something unexpected happened that changed everything. The representative rose to speak. They were one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in known space. Their bodies were made of living crystal that chimed softly when they moved. Their representative was called melodic resonance, and when it spoke, everyone listened. The Concordat will not support sanctions against humanity. We will not interfere with their rescue operation, and we strongly advise every species in this chamber to stay out of their way." Shock rippled through the delegates. There had always been voices of peace and moderation. This was unprecedented. Melodic resonance continued in its musical voice. 600 years ago, the Dominion kidnapped a research team, 83 of our people, including 17 younglings. We petitioned this council for help. We followed proper procedures. We respected galactic law. It took 4 years to negotiate their release. By then, only 12 of them were still alive. The crystal being turned to face the full assembly. Humans will not wait 4 years. They will not negotiate. They will not ask permission. They will burn a path through anyone who stands between them and their children. And when it is over, the galaxy will remember what happens when you threaten us young. We choose to stand aside and let them teach that lesson. The vote to sanction humanity failed. Not because the council agreed with human methods, but because too many species were afraid of what would happen if they got in the way. Aboard the Quiet Blade, the human children had no idea that the galaxy was watching their fate. They only knew that every day they spent in captivity was another day to learn, to plan, and to prepare. Danny Harper had organized the children into teams. The older ones took turns watching the guards and reporting any changes in routine. The younger ones were kept in the center of the group, protected and comforted by those around them. Lucy continued her exploration of the ship through the ventilation system, bringing back new information with each trip. Sam had made a breakthrough with the communication system. He could not speak the language yet, but he had figured out something valuable. "They are scared of us," he whispered to Danny. "I can hear it in their voices when they talk about us. They expected us to be broken by now. They do not understand why we are still fighting." Danny nodded slowly. "Good, let them be scared. Scared people make mistakes." They had discovered something terrifying about their captives. Human children were afraid of the dark just like children were. But unlike children, humans could function in darkness. Their eyes adjusted. Their other senses sharpened. Darkness did not paralyze them. They, however, had evolved on a world with no night. Their planet orbited so close to its twin suns that darkness only came during rare eclipses. They had no biological adaptation for low light conditions. In the dark, they were blind and helpless. Lucy had discovered this during one of her ventilation crawls when she accidentally triggered a power fluctuation that dimmed the lights in a corridor. The guard she was observing had panicked completely, stumbling into walls and crying out in fear until the lights returned. She reported this to Danny immediately. "They cannot see in the dark at all. They bump into things and fall over." Danny's eyes lit up with understanding. This was the weakness they needed. If they could cut the power to their section of the ship, they would have the advantage. The guards would be blind and terrified, while the human children could still see well enough to move. The question was timing. If they made their move too early before rescue arrived, they would be recaptured and probably punished. If they waited too long, they might move them somewhere more secure. They needed to know when help was coming. As if in answer to an unspoken prayer, Sam intercepted a transmission that made his heart race. Human ships had been detected entering space. The Quiet Blade was being ordered to proceed to a research station in a nearby nebula for protection. "They are coming," Sam told the others, his voice shaking with emotion. "Earth sent ships. They are actually coming for us." For the first time since their capture, some of the younger children started to cry. But these were not tears of fear or despair. They were tears of hope. Danny gathered everyone close and spoke in a low voice. "Listen to me. Our people are coming, but we cannot just wait. We need to be ready to help them. When I give the signal, we are going to cut the power and take control of this section. Can you all be brave for just a little longer?" 22 heads nodded in the dim light of the holding cell. 22 children who had been stolen from their homes, and dragged across the stars, looked at Danny Harper with trust and determination in their eyes. They were scared. They were tired. They wanted their parents and their beds and their normal lives back. But they were also human, and humans did not wait to be saved. They saved themselves. The nebula was a cloud of purple and gold gas that stretched across 3 light-years of space. Hidden within its swirling depths was a research station where illegal experiments were conducted far from the eyes of galactic authorities. This was where the quiet blade had taken the human children, believing they would be safe from pursuit. They were wrong. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the Relentless as his ship emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the nebula. 2 other human warships flanked him, the cruisers Defiant and Valor. Behind them came a dozen support vessels carrying Marines, medical teams, and enough firepower to level a small moon. "I have the station on sensors," Lisa Grant reported. 6 warships in defensive formation. The quiet blade is docked at the central hub. Studied the tactical display. The ships were smaller than his, but they outnumbered him. Their station's shields were military-grade, designed to withstand prolonged bombardment. A frontal assault would be costly in lives and time. "Options?" he asked. Lisa pulled up a diagram of the station. "The nebula gas interferes with their sensors. If we send a strike team through the gas cloud, they could breach the station before they realize what is happening. Meanwhile, our main force keeps the enemy ships occupied." "Casualties?" "Unknown, but acceptable if it means reaching those kids faster." Nodded. It was not a decision he made lightly. Men and women would die in this attack, but every minute those children spent in captivity was another minute of trauma they would carry for the rest of their lives. Speed was worth the cost. "Do it," he ordered. Marine Commander Jack Riley led the strike team personally. 50 of his best soldiers loaded into stealth shuttles designed for exactly this kind of operation. They wore heavy assault armor and carried weapons that could punch through shields like paper. Every single one of them had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. The shuttles launched into the nebula and disappeared from sensors almost immediately. Watched them go, then turned his attention to the enemy fleet. "All ships begin attack run. Draw their fire away from the station. Make them focus on us." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations. Human ships were larger and more heavily armed, but they were fighting to protect their own territory. They knew the nebula and used it to their advantage, appearing from the gas clouds to strike and then vanishing before human weapons could target them. The Relentless took hit after hit but kept pushing forward, refused to give ground, keeping the fleet busy while Jack Riley's team approached the station undetected. Inside the station, alarms began to wail. Commander rushed to the command center, demanding information. His officers reported that human ships were attacking the defensive fleet, but something felt wrong. The attack was too direct, too obvious. Humans were known for their cunning tactics. Why would they announce their presence so clearly? The answer came when explosions rocked the lower levels of the station. The strike team had breached the outer hull and was cutting through the station's corridors like a hot knife through butter. "Seal the detention wing," screamed. "Protect the specimens." It was too late. In the holding cell, Danny Harper had heard the distant explosions and knew the moment had come. He looked at Sam and nodded. Sam reached into the wall panel he had been secretly accessing for days and triggered a power overload in their section. The lights went out. The guards outside the cell screamed in terror as darkness consumed them. They stumbled blindly, firing their weapons in random directions, hitting nothing but walls. Inside the cell, 23 human children moved with purpose. Danny had prepared them for this. The older kids knew exactly what to do. They forced open the cell door using the emergency release Sam had identified. They poured into the corridor, avoiding the panicking guards with ease. Human eyes adjusted to the darkness quickly, turning this worst nightmare into a hunting ground. Lucy led the way through the ventilation shafts she had memorized. The smaller children followed her into the metal tunnels while the older ones dealt with any guards who got too close. They did not have weapons, but they had numbers and darkness and the desperate strength of young predators fighting for survival. Carlos Santos, the 14-year-old from Brazil, tackled a guard who stumbled into their path. There was twice his size but blind and terrified. Carlos pinned him to the ground and held him there until the others had passed. "Go," he shouted to Danny. "I will catch up." Danny hesitated for only a second before leading the group forward. Every instinct screamed at him to stay and help, but he had 22 other children depending on him. He had to keep them moving. Jack Riley's Marines cut through the station level by level. They moved with brutal efficiency, clearing rooms and eliminating resistance. They had never faced human soldiers in close combat before. They had read reports about aggression and physical capabilities. Nothing had prepared them for the reality. A Marine private named Tors was the first to hear the children. She held up her fist to stop her squad and listened. Somewhere ahead, she heard human voices, young voices, speaking English. "Commander Riley," she said into her radio, "I have contact with the children, Sector 7, Level 12. Hold position, we are on our way." Moved forward anyway. She could not wait. The voices were scared and urgent. She rounded a corner and found herself face to face with a group of children emerging from a ventilation shaft. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a 12-year-old boy with dirty hair and exhausted eyes stepped forward. "Are you here to take us home?" Danny Harper asked. Tors had been a Marine for 15 years. She had fought in wars and seen terrible things. She had never cried on a mission before. But looking at these brave, frightened children who had kept themselves alive against impossible odds, she felt tears running down her face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking, "we are here to take you home." The reunion was chaos and relief and joy all mixed together. Jack Riley arrived with the rest of his team and immediately established a defensive perimeter around the children. Medical personnel began checking each child for injuries while soldiers held off the remaining defenders. Danny refused treatment until every other child had been seen first. He stood with Jack Riley, watching over his group like a shepherd guarding his flock. "You did good, kid," Jack told him. "You kept them together, you kept them fighting." Danny shook his head. "We just did what we had to do. We knew someone would come." "How did you know?" The boy looked up at the Marine commander with eyes that seemed far older than 12 years. "Because we are human, and humans do not leave anyone behind." Carlos Santos caught up with them at the extraction point, bruised but grinning. The guard he had tackled was still lying in the dark corridor, too scared to move. Lucy ran to hug her brother, and for the first time since their capture, Danny Harper let himself feel hope. Outside, the battle was ending. The fleet had been crippled, with 4 ships destroyed and the others retreating into the nebula. The station's defenses had been neutralized. Commander was captured trying to escape in a shuttle. Captain Cole watched from the bridge of the Relentless as the rescue shuttles returned carrying their precious cargo. 23 children, scared and tired but alive. All of them. He let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for weeks and allowed himself a small smile. "Mission accomplished," he said quietly. "Let us bring them home." Relentless dropped out of faster than light travel above Earth on a clear autumn morning. The planet hung in the viewport like a blue and green jewel, beautiful and welcoming after the darkness of space. On the bridge, Captain Cole looked at his home world and felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Behind him, in the medical bay and the converted cargo holds, 23 children were preparing for their return. They had been fed, treated, and given clean clothes. Counselors had spoken with each of them during the journey home, preparing them for what came next, but nothing could truly prepare them for what waited on the surface. The landing field at Geneva was crowded with thousands of people. Government officials, military personnel, medical teams, and journalists filled every available space. But at the front of the crowd, held back by security barriers, were the families. And Harper stood together, holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. They had not slept properly since the night their children were taken. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw the violet light and heard their own screams. Now, watching the shuttle descend from the sky, they could barely breathe. The ramp lowered and the children began to emerge. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but the families heard nothing. They only had eyes for their sons and daughters. Danny Harper walked down the ramp holding Lucy's hand. They were thin and tired, with dark circles under their eyes and a haunted look that would take years to fade. But they were alive. They were home. Broke through the security line before anyone could stop her. She ran to her children and fell to her knees, pulling them both into an embrace so fierce it seemed like she would never let go. Was right behind her, wrapping his arms around all three of them and crying openly. "Mom," Lucy whispered into her mother's shoulder, "I knew you would come. Danny kept telling us someone would come." All across the landing field, similar reunions played out. Parents held children they had thought lost forever. Siblings embraced. Grandparents wept. The sound of crying and laughing mixed together into a chorus of pure human emotion. Admiral Frank watched from the edge of the crowd. He had commanded this operation from start to finish, and seeing it end successfully was a relief beyond words. But he knew that this was not truly the end. They had to answer for what they had done, and the galaxy needed to understand what had happened here. In the weeks that followed, the full weight of human justice fell upon the collective. Commander and his crew were put on trial for kidnapping, illegal experimentation, and crimes against sentient beings. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings from the Quiet Blade showed exactly what had been planned for the human children. The verdict was guilty on all counts, was sentenced to life imprisonment in a human facility, a punishment that terrified him more than death. His crew received similar sentences. The government tried to distance itself from the incident, but humanity was not interested in excuses. A fleet of human warships entered space and destroyed their primary military shipyard. No warning was given. No negotiation was offered. The message was clear. This is what happens when you take our children. The Galactic Council demanded explanations. Ambassador delivered humanity's response in the same chamber where she had made her original warning. We gave them a deadline, they ignored it. We promised consequences. We delivered them. If any species in this chamber believes we were wrong, feel free to file a complaint. We will give it the attention it deserves. No complaints were filed. The incident changed how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. Before, they had been classified as dangerous but primitive, interesting to study but not truly civilized. Now, the other species understood something fundamental about humans that they had missed before. Humans were pack animals. They formed bonds that transcended logic and self-interest, and the strongest of these bonds was the one between parents and children. Threat: a human's offspring, and you would face not just one angry individual, but an entire species united in protective fury. The representative melodic resonance made a speech that was broadcast across known space. We have witnessed what humans will do for their young. Let this serve as a lesson to all civilizations. They are not mindless savages. They are devoted parents. They are loyal friends. They are dangerous enemies. But most importantly, they are creatures who will cross any distance, fight any battle, and pay any price for those they love. Treat them accordingly. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal for the rescued children. But normal was different now. Danny Harper went back to school in Montana, but he was not the same boy who had once laid in his backyard watching the stars. He was quieter, more serious, and more protective of those around him. Teachers noticed that he always positioned himself between his classmates and the door, always aware of exits and threats. Lucy grew up to become a psychologist specializing in trauma recovery. She spent her career helping others work through experiences similar to her own. She never forgot the lessons she learned aboard the Quiet Blade, and she never stopped being grateful for the brother who had kept her safe. Sam joined the military as soon as he was old enough. He became one of the finest intelligence officers in the fleet, using his natural gift for technology to protect Earth from threats both known and unknown. When asked why he chose this path, he always gave the same answer: because someone has to make sure this never happens again. Carlos Santos returned to Brazil and became a teacher. He worked in poor neighborhoods where kids faced different kinds of dangers, and he taught them what he had learned in captivity: stay together, protect each other, never give up. The other children found their own ways forward. Some struggled for years with nightmares and fear. Others seemed to recover quickly but carried invisible scars. All of them remembered what had happened and what it meant to be human. 10 years after the rescue, a memorial was built in Geneva on the spot where the children had returned to Earth. It was a simple structure, a circle of 23 stone pillars surrounding a central flame that burned day and night. On each pillar was carved the name of a child and a single word in their native language meaning survivor. Admiral Frank, now retired, gave the dedication speech at the memorial's opening. He was older now, his hair completely and his face lined with age. But his voice was still strong as he addressed the gathered crowd and the cameras that broadcast his words across human space and beyond. 40 years ago, a species that considered itself our superior decided to take our children. They thought we were simple creatures, dangerous but ultimately controllable. They were wrong. We showed them, and we showed the entire galaxy, what happens when you threaten our young. He paused and looked at the flames dancing in the center of the memorial. Let this place stand as a reminder, not of fear or hatred, but of love. We built this memorial because we love our children so much that we would cross the stars to bring them home. We built warships and trained soldiers and risked everything because 23 young lives mattered more to us than treaties or trade or our own safety. That is what it means to be human. His final words would be remembered for generations. To any civilization watching, let this serve as your only warning. We are humans. We come from a world of fire and ice, of predators and poison, of storms that would shatter your cities. We have earned every scar our planet gave us, and we protect our children with a fury you cannot comprehend. Cross that line and there will be no diplomacy, no mercy, no second chances, only consequences. Danny Harper stood in the crowd with his sister beside him. He was 22 years old now, a graduate student studying xenobiology. He wanted to understand the species that had taken him, not for revenge, but because knowledge was still power. The more humans understood about the galaxy, the better they could protect themselves and those they loved. Lucy squeezed his hand as the ceremony ended. "Do you ever think about them?" Danny nodded slowly. "Sometimes. I try not to hate them. They were just scared of us, really. Scared and curious and stupid. But I will never forget what they did, and I will never let it happen again. Not to anyone." They walked away from the memorial together, two survivors of humanity's first kidnapping. Behind them, the eternal flame burned bright against the darkening sky, a promise and a warning to any species who might be watching. They were awake. They remembered everything, and they protected their own with a love that burned hotter than any star.